Number 9. HMAS Protector. During the early 1880s, the South Australian government commissioned the construction of a large flat iron gunboat called the HMAS Protector. Built in England during the aftermath of the Russian scare of the 1870s, the 180-foot vessel was one of the largest boats of its kind. Its purpose was to defend the state's coastline against possible attacks amid fears of a possible Russian invasion. After serving in the Boxer Rebellion in China at the turn of the century, the Protector became a Commonwealth naval vessel based out of Sydney. During this period, the ship was used for training naval militia forces, and it continued to fulfill this role while following the establishment of the Royal Australian Navy. At the beginning of World War I, the Protector served as an escort to submarines traveling to the colonies of German New Guinea. It remained in Australian waters for as much of the conflict and served as a minesweeper for a brief time. In 1924, after a 40-year career, the ship was retired from naval service and slated for disposal. What was left of the Protector served as a fuel bunker and then as a lighter, which is a type of vessel used for transporting goods between moored ships. In 1943, the U.S. military requisitioned the ship for service in World War II. While being towed to New Guinea, however, the Protector collided with a tugboat. The vessel was initially abandoned and was later relocated to the shallow waters off Heron Island, where it was sunk as a breakwater. It remains there to this day in an obvious state of decay and can be reached on foot at low tide. At high tide, the rusting hulk is a popular diving and snorkeling site. Number 8. Toadzilla. In early 2023, rangers at Conway National Park in Queensland discovered a massive cane toad that had been described as resembling a football with legs, and appropriately named Toadzilla. The portly specimen is believed to be the largest example of the Rhinella marina species on record. The previous record holder made the Guinness Book in 1991 after weighing in at 5 pounds 13 ounces. Even the park rangers, who are presumably used to encountering Australia's crazy wildlife, were shocked by the discovery of the rooster-sized toad. Ranger Kylie Gray described the creature as a big, warty, brown, ugly cane toad just sitting in the dirt. Because female cane toads grow larger than males, the team concluded that the hefty amphibian was most likely female. In a tweet, Gray explained that a cane toad of this size will eat anything it can fit into its mouth, including insects, reptiles, and even small mammals. Due to the environmental damage that the overgrown animal could cause, the team that discovered it decided that it was best to euthanize it. The gargantuan toad's remains were sent to the Queensland Museum for further study. Which Australian animals would you want to see up close? And which ones terrify you the most? Let us know in the comments below. But hit that subscribe button first. Number 7. Glenbank Shipwreck. Built in Scotland in the late 19th century, the Glenbank was a steel-hulled, three-masted cargo vessel called a bark. It was sold to a Finnish owner in 1905. After setting sail from Western Australia for England with a load of copper in 1911, the 240-foot-long ship encountered a brutal cyclone and sank. Out of the 24-man crew, the only survivor was a 22-year-old Finnish sailor named Antti Kitala. According to a report, Kitala was in the rigging with the ship's third mate when the disaster occurred almost in a moment. Immediately after the Glenbank sank, the two sailors and the cook were the only 3 crew members left on the water surface. A massive wave swept through, and Kitala never saw the other 2 men again. He clung for dear life to a piece of debris until he washed up on Legender Island, where he spent the next 3 days without food or water before being picked up by a passing boat. The location of the Glenbark wreck remained a mystery for the next 111 years. In the meantime, researchers concluded that its unsecured cargo of copper ore shifted during the cyclone, destroying the ship's hull and deck and causing it to capsize. A group of local fishermen discovered the wreck in 2022 and alerted state archaeologists, who traveled to the site and confirmed its identity as the Glenbank. More recently, it was featured in an episode of the Disney Plus series Shipwreck Hunters Australia. Number 6. The Mermaid Tree. From 1819 to 1822, Lieutenant Philip Parker King charted Australia's Kimberley coast. In October 1820, his ship, the HMC Mermaid, sprang a leak, forcing him to beach it for repairs at Careening Bay in what is now Prince Regent National Park. Located along the northern coast of Western Australia, the site is extremely remote even today. During the Mermaid Crew's time there, the ship's carpenter carved the words HMC Mermaid 1820 into the trunk of an extremely large boab tree. At the time, the trunk had a roughly 29-foot circumference. In the 200 years since, it has grown to about 39 feet. The carving remains clearly visible today, marking one of the few signs of a human presence in an otherwise pristine wilderness. Popularly known as the Mermaid Tree, the boab is only reachable by boat, but is nevertheless a popular tourist destination. In addition to the inscription created by the mermaid's carpenter, it features a lesser-known carving of a semicircular niche. Located on the opposite side of the trunk, its age, origins, and purpose are largely a mystery. Researchers believe it functioned as an altar of some sort, and that it was created by an ethnic group called the Makassans, who live mainly on Indonesia's Sulawesi Island, or by modern-day Indonesians. It's also popular that the altar was created and used by Catholic members of the King's crew, who may have worshipped separately from crew members who were loyal to the Church of England. Unfortunately, nobody knows for sure, and we may never know. Number 5. A massive hunk of gold. While searching for treasure in Victoria, Australia in early 2023, an amateur metal detectorist heard the hopeful beep of his device alerting him to the presence of something buried in the dirt. He was shocked to dig up a 10-pound rock containing a noticeably large amount of gold. The prospector knew he had found something special, but even he was unaware of the nugget's value, according to Darren Camp, who owns Lucky Strike Gold. Camp told Live Science that the man walked into a shop with the specimen and asked if it might be worth around $10,000. He was probably thrilled to learn that its estimated value was closer to 10 times that amount. Camp was shocked by the discovery. In 40 years of experience in the gold prospecting business, it was the largest nugget he had ever seen. But he was even more surprised when the gold hunter told him that the piece he brought was just half of the nugget he found. Altogether, the rock was found to contain 5.2 pounds of gold with an estimated value of around $160,000 or 240,000 Australian dollars. The discovery was made in a region called the Golden Triangle, which was the epicenter of Australia's 19th century gold rush. Camp purchased the rock from its discoverer, who chose to remain anonymous to the press. If you ran into a windfall, would you let the world know about it? Or would you try to keep the news under wraps? Why? Share your thoughts in the comments below, but first, be sure to subscribe. Number 4. SS Gothenburg. The 197-foot-long SS Gothenburg was built in England in 1854. It operated as a passenger ship, offering regular service between Australia and New Zealand, and between the Australian cities of Adelaide and Darwin. While carrying 37 crew members, 98 passengers, and 205 pounds of gold from Darwin to Melbourne in 1875, the Gothenburg encountered a vicious storm in the Great Barrier Reef off Queensland's northern coast. The vessel struck a reef, and the crew's attempt to throw it in reverse and back out of trouble during high tide only ripped more holes in the hull. As the weather worsened, the ship was pushed further into the reef, the exact opposite direction that the crew wanted it to travel in. 22 survivors managed to make their way onto 3 lifeboats, while somewhere between 98 and 112 people perished in the wreck. The gold was recovered 2 weeks later, and the sunken ship was more or less forgotten about until 1971, when divers rediscovered it at a depth of 30 to 52 feet. Today, it's a protected wreck and functions as a home for fish and other sea creatures. Number 3. Ancient tree carvings. In northern Australia's Tanami Desert, there's a collection of boab trees with designs carved into their trunks. These images, known as dendroglyphs or arboglyphs, consist mostly of snakes, including some that are depicted in a coiled position, while others that are wrapped around trees. Other carvings show emu tracks and other shapes. Based on the size of the trunks, the carvings are believed to be hundreds or even thousands of years old. In 2022, researchers published the first ever archaeological study of the dendroglyphs, which are common throughout Australia but have long been overshadowed by Aboriginal rock art. During the survey, traditional landowner Brenda Garstone explained that the snakes depicted in the boab carvings represent the indigenous story of the creation of the landscape. This and other stories have been passed down by elders from one generation to the next and have survived for centuries into modern times. At the time of the image's creation, the boab trees would have served as an ideal place to camp in the shade. The species is also historically valued among First Nations Australians for its edible parts and its medicinal uses, as well as the inner bark of its roots, which is used for making string. Between the risk of wildfires and the uncertainty of the boab tree's age, the Tanami Desert dendroglyphs are threatened. The recent survey was undertaken largely in an effort to document the culturally significant artwork before it inevitably disappears. Number 2. The SS Youngala. Built in the early 20th century, the 350-foot-long steamship SS Youngala operated as a passenger and cargo vessel between various Australian ports. It was the first ship to offer direct service along the 3,100-mile route between Fremantle and Brisbane. The Youngala's final voyage, which also happened to be its 99th voyage in Australian waters, began on March 14, 1911. During the first 2 legs of its journey, the ship traveled from Melbourne to Brisbane, then to Mackay, and then left Mackay for Townsville with 49 passengers, 73 crew members, and 617 tons of cargo, and was last seen sailing into the Whitsunday Passage 5 hours later. A weather report from that day warned of a tropical cyclone along the Youngala's route, but the ship wasn't fitted with the necessary equipment for receiving the warning. When it failed to arrive at Townsville on schedule, there was no immediate concern. It was assumed that the ship had taken shelter from the cyclone, but when more than 2 days passed, it was listed as missing. A search failed to turn up any trace of the vessel or the 122 people on board. The wreck was located in the 1950s off Elva Beach along the northern Queensland coast, where it sits at a depth of roughly 100 feet. In addition to being remarkably intact, it has become a habitat for a diverse array of marine life and has been ranked as one of the world's top scuba diving sites. Number 1. Prehistoric stone tools. As part of its promise to preserve any important archaeological sites found on its land, the Australia mining giant Rio Tinto sponsored an excavation of a sacred ancient site known as Yura in 2022. Located in Western Australia's eastern Pilbara region, the rock shelter is rooted in the Yinhawangka culture, who still live in the region today. Members of the community participated in the excavation alongside researchers from the University of Western Australia. The team uncovered an array of stone tools, charcoal, and bone fragments, which dated the site back to at least 50,000 years ago. Until this most recent dig, the oldest artifacts found at Yura were estimated to be around 23,000 years. The newly discovered objects prove that the Yinhawangka people were living in the area more than twice as long ago than previous evidence suggested. This means that Yura was occupied at the height of the last ice age, which sea levels were much lower than they are today, and the continent's coastlines extended out much further than they do now. At the time, much of Australia would have been uninhabitable. The presence of people at Yura indicates that the site represented one of the handful of livable regions, which would have had a nearby source of fresh water. Based on the recent findings, it's one of the oldest recorded sites ever found in Australia. The excavation at Yura came as part of Rio Tinto's ongoing effort to improve its relations with the traditional landowner groups in the aftermath of the Juukan Gorge disaster in 2020, when the company blasted a 46,000-year-old rock shelter without consent. A company spokesperson said that Rio Tinto plans to fund further excavations and cultural research projects in collaboration with traditional landowner communities. Thanks for watching. Which of these discoveries was your favorite? Let us know in the comments below, and remember to subscribe for more videos like these. See you soon!